he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good evening, I'm Sophia Wensler with your headlines at 6 o'clock. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney has called a snap election for the 28th of April. Mr Carney has only been the Prime Minister for a matter of days after the former Bank of England governor took over from Justin Trudeau. Mr Carney addressed ongoing tensions with the US after Donald Trump's trade war and plans to make Canada the 51st state.
We are facing the most significant crisis of our lifetimes because of President Trump's unjustified trade actions and his threats to our sovereignty. Our response must be to build a strong economy and a more secure Canada. President Trump claims that Canada isn't a real country. He wants to break us so America can own us. We will not let that happen.
Meanwhile, Sir Ed Davies accused Labour of allowing Donald Trump to bully Britain on trade amid reports the government could ditch a tax on tech giants to avoid US tariffs. The Lib Dem leader says the move would benefit Elon Musk and is now calling for tariffs on Teslas and for Britain to lead a coordinated response with Europe and Canada. The Chancellor says she hasn't ruled out changes to the digital services tax as talks with Washington continue. Rachel Reeves insists firms should pay tax where they operate, but admits a balance must be struck to protect UK exports. In other news, the government's planning more than £2 billion in annual cuts to the civil service under a major cost-saving drive. Departments will be told to slash spending on HR, policy and office management by up to 15%. Frontline services are being protected, but unions warn thousands of jobs could go. It comes ahead of Rachel Reeves' spring statement on Wednesday as pressure grows to balance the books without raising taxes. Now, Pope Francis has made his first public appearance in 5 weeks, waving to cheering crowds from a Rome hospital window. Doctors say the 88-year-old suffered 2 very critical episodes that put his life in danger. He was admitted in February and will now need at least 2 months of rest at the Vatican. And failed asylum seekers could be sent to the Balkans under early-stage government plans to set up overseas returns hubs. The centres would house people whose asylum claims and appeals have been rejected, including those who can't be returned to unsafe countries like Iran or Somalia. Payments would be made to host countries with current proposals focused on Albania, Serbia and Bosnia. Charities warn the plans are unworkable and inhumane, while ministers insist they must be affordable, legal and effective. Those are the latest GB News headlines. More in an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Joining me now is the Chief Secretary to the Treasury, Darren Jones. Lovely to see you this morning, Mr Jones. I know you've got a busy week ahead. Before we get on to talking about the spring statement, can we just have a chat about Heathrow? The CEO, Thomas Waldby, has said he's proud of his team. Do you agree?
I'm sure the team at Heathrow responded in line with their normal policies in response to a critical incident like the one we saw. But evidently, we need to do this review that the Energy Secretary has announced with the energy regulator and system operator to understand why there was a single point of failure in the way there was for this fire at the substation, resulting in Heathrow, a critical piece of national infrastructure, having to close in the way that it has. I'm sure there are some lessons there that can be learnt, and we'll be working with the operators at Heathrow as well as with our regulators to make sure that we do so.
Has the government ruled out sabotage now? Because there seems to be less dialogue about it being about perhaps a terrorist threat or indeed the work of an outside agent.
I'm not briefed on that information, I'm afraid, Camilla, so I can't tell you. I mean, I'll have to refer you to comments from Number 10 and the Department for Transport. But of course, when we think about the resilience of our critical national infrastructure, we have to consider all of the different issues that may be in play, from climate through to security and policing issues in the way that you've described.
OK, let's get on to subjects you can talk about. The Times had leaked a letter that you've written to government departments in the week calling for the, quotes, ruthless prioritisation of government spending. You're talking about real-term cuts of between 5.7 and 11.2% to government departments, unprotected departments. So that's all departments really apart from the Department for the Ministry of Defence and indeed the Department for Health. In what world isn't this austerity?
Well, it's not austerity because we're increasing the amount of money we're putting into our public services. There was a huge increase at the budget in the autumn last year, £100 billion of additional capital investment, £40 billion of additional tax rises going straight into frontline public services. That was a big injection of spending because we needed to get a grip of public services after the mess that we found them in from the last Conservative administration. But I think the letter you're referring to, Camilla, is the letter that I issued to start the spending review at the end of the last calendar year. And we have asked departments to plan against certain scenarios, but we've not come to any conclusions yet. We're going to be in the middle now of negotiating those spending plans. It's right that we're looking line by line at every pound that government spends. The first time that's been done in 17 years. And we want to make sure that we're modernising the state so that it's achieving better outcomes for people in the future at a lower cost.
OK, but if you're modelling up to 11.2% in cuts, then some departments could have to cut by that much.
Well, as I say, that's not a decision that has been taken. They're what we call planning assumptions, where we ask departments to look line by line through what they're spending and to come back with different kind of buckets of critical spend, low value for money for spend, spend that might be in relation to priorities of the last government that's not a priority for this government. And we're now just working through that process of negotiation, where we're looking at those results line by line. And we publish the public spending plans in June. They will all be geared towards delivering our plan for change, the priorities that this government was elected on to deliver for people across the country.
Although government spending will still be around 45% of GDP by the end of this Parliament. So it's not really bringing government spending down at all overall.
Well, that's my point. That's why it's not austerity, because we are increasing spending into public services. But that doesn't mean that there are not difficult decisions elsewhere in the public sector to take. One of the things that we've been speaking about today and this week, for example, is the public sector is still quite unproductive. We have a lot of old IT systems. There's a lot of things still done on paper. Anyone that's trying to engage with public services knows that it's quite difficult to do so. And we just know from looking at the private sector, there's a huge amount of opportunity there to improve productivity, to free up cash and to invest that back into frontline public services.
So it's a bit like the welfare cuts that weren't really cuts, they're just a growth reduction. Well,
the welfare changes were a reflection of the fact that the welfare system as designed was not being operated in that way. That's why they've needed to be reformed, to make sure that we're supporting people to get into work, and for people who are the most severely disabled or who can't work, that they get appropriate support too. It's right that we look at these systems, whether it's welfare or the administration of the state or public service spending, to make sure that we're being as effective and productive as possible, because that's what people would expect us to do when we're using their money.
I know, but government spending in 2024 to 25 as follows. Benefits, £314 billion. That's bigger than the health budget, £202 billion. So when you say you're going to cut £5 billion from benefits, all you're really saying is that growth from now till 5 years' time isn't going to be £49 billion, it's going to be £45. It's just a growth reduction, it's not a cut at all, is it?
Well, partly, Camilla, you'll recognise that we are an ageing population, so we're not having as many babies, basically, as our parents and grandparents did. So we've got more older people who are coming into their pension age. They're able to obviously draw down their pension, and that's why the pensions cost of the Department for Work and Pensions budget is growing, because we've got more people claiming their pensions. They're entitled to do so, and we have to pay for that. But where there has been system failure or kind of design failure in policy elsewhere, we do also need to get a grip of that, which is what we're doing.
But you've also got a problem with not enough young people in work. The number of young people claiming benefits now has shot up. You're asking people to come off benefits and go into work, and yet Rachel Reeves came up with a budget in the autumn which has absolutely clobbered businesses. Businesses are now saying we're reluctant to hire because we're paying far too much in national insurance contributions. So you're trying to get people into work, but you're not facilitating businesses to hire them. You're clobbering business.
Well, we've increased national insurance contributions that employers have to make. That is true. But we've seen from the jobs figures over the last quarter a growth of nearly 200,000 new additional jobs in the labour market here in the UK. That is a good thing. And the important thing for younger people who are out of work and being stuck on universal credit, not being able to get into work, is that we need to help them to be able to get better if they're sick. Often that's about access to mental health services. But also we need to make sure that they've got access to the training and skills that they need to have to get into work. That's why we've announced today, for example, our construction package. We think we can get 60,000 additional jobs in engineering, bricklaying, electrical and carpentry skills by supporting the construction industry. That's exactly the type of outcome we're trying to achieve for young people across the country.
Well, yes, if construction firms can afford to take new staff on. We've got 300,000 SMEs saying that they plan to lay off workers because of the budget. We've got the number of companies listed on Companies House down for the first time since 2012. We've got 203,000 businesses having folded since Labour took power. And there's also been a 15.5% drop in new businesses starting up. So the budget has been anti-business, hasn't it?
Well, not if you look at the fact that, as I say, there's been nearly 200,000 additional new jobs created in the economy.
Can you look at my figures that I've just cited?
Sure, and we're exchanging figures, as we often do in these political interviews. But look, you only need to talk to businesses about where we're taking this country in terms of its policy direction. You can see already in the weekend papers, which I'm sure you've been reviewing on your show, really positive feedback from CEOs and company investors about the UK being a stable place to do business, a country that has a clear mandate and a policy for growth in the economy, where a government's willing to get in and work alongside business. And that's what we've done with this construction task force. I mean, the package has been built alongside the construction industry. This is endorsed by businesses in the construction industry. They tell us that the policies we've announced today will help them to hire more people, to train more people, and the fact that we're going to get on and work with them and investors and play our part with public spending where it's relevant to get those houses built, to get that infrastructure built, that creates the circumstances for which you can employ people and pay them for their good jobs that they're doing and help the economy grow. That's a good thing.
I don't know what CEOs the Treasury's been speaking to. We do a section on this show every week where we speak to small and medium-sized business owners to find out how they've been affected by the budget. Not one person has come forward who runs a small or medium-sized business to say they've been positively affected by the budget. We've spoken to people in hospitality, we've spoken to people in retail, we had 2 hairdressers in last week. They've been absolutely clobbered. So I don't know, what business owners are you speaking to? Because we haven't spoken to anybody who has this narrative that everything's great with business in the UK.
Yeah, I mean, and look, we want to go further and faster on the economy. We recognise we need to get more growth into the economy and to help businesses to do that. But as you would expect, we talk to businesses of all sizes, big companies, like I said, in the construction industry, all the way through to SME and startup builders who we want to support to be able to get houses built in this country. And, you know, it's worth remembering that in the budget, the national insurance changes for employers was designed in a way to protect smaller businesses. It's right to say that 50% of businesses in this country will either be paying the same as or less than they did before, because we took that step to try to protect smaller businesses in what I recognise was a difficult budget for business, but allowed us to honour our pledge to not increase payslip taxes that people pay when they go to work, or VAT in the shops, whilst getting a grip of the mess that we'd inherited from the Conservatives.
All right, a quick word on net zero. The business department came out with a report this week which was leaked to The Sun. The report showed that net zero will impact negatively on GDP by 2030 by 10%, increase national debt, increase the risk of a financial crisis and hit the poorest the hardest. Why on earth are you proceeding with it?
Well, I've not seen that report, but what I would say from what you've asked me is how you do net zero is important. When you're talking about energy security, when you're talking about jobs in the energy sector, when you're helping people's homes be protected from flooding or resilient to extreme weather, that can be a good thing for the economy, it can be a good thing for jobs, it could be a good thing for people and businesses, but you've got to do it in the right way, which is what we're focused on doing.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
Now, parents across the country who had suffered a miscarriage will now be granted the right to bereavement leave. It's hard to believe that wasn't part of the law before. Well, it's now part of Labour's reforms on workers' rights.
Well, the change will benefit those who lose a pregnancy before 24 weeks.
Well, it's a victory for Keely Langthorne. She's the woman who's led the campaign for the law to be changed. And finally, it has. And Keely is with us now. She's the founder of George's Law and a partner, she's a lawyer as well, at RWK Goodman. And she herself has suffered 3 miscarriages. Keely joins us now. And Keely, it is so good to see you. Victory at last.
Victory at last. We've come a long way here, Lee.
Yeah. And we've spoken over the years so many times, haven't we? You've been campaigning for years for this under George's Law.
Yeah.
And it happened on George's birthday this week.
It did so, yeah. It all started back in 22, shortly after I lost George. Obviously met you shortly after, started the campaign, and yeah, Monday evening we'll go down in history, George's 3rd birthday, and being told that, yeah, it's going to finally be law.
So what will happen now? How much leave will women be able to have?
So now it will, Stephen, mirror that if you lose a baby after 24 weeks. So in this current stance, the law says if you lose a baby over 24 weeks, you get 2 weeks paid leave. So the same will now apply if you lose a baby under 24 weeks, so from 0 to 24.
It is unbelievable that the way that the law stood was that you could potentially have lost a baby at, let's say, 8 p.m. and you would be expected to be in the office at 9 a.m. the next morning.
Yeah, and if you think I had a 12-hour labour with George, I bathed him, I left him at the mortuary, but the law says that I should be, as a lawyer, back in work time according the next day.
GB News, the People's Channel.
This spring, the Chancellor steps up to the dispatch box to make a statement. But what kind of statement will it be?
Taxes, spending, growth, benefits, cost of living. What's changing? And more importantly, how does it affect you?
Does she have the headroom to make headway?
Will it ease the squeeze or tighten the grip?
Will businesses boom or struggle to survive?
And does the spring statement have real impact, or is it just political posturing?
GB News brings you the analysis that matters. Just what it means for your money, your home, your future.
The Spring Statement 2025, Wednesday on GB News.
Joining me now is the Shadow Chancellor of the Exchequer, Mel Stride. Lovely to see you this morning. Thank you for your time. How come you're calling this an emergency budget rather than a spring statement? That's not what Rachel Reeves is calling it.
Well, no, what Rachel Reeves wants everybody to believe is there's nothing to see here, but we couldn't be further from that. The distinction, Camilla, is that a fiscal event or an emergency budget is when you've really got to make big changes to the country's finances. And in this case, because this government has killed growth stone dead and her fiscal headroom, as it's called, the margin against her targets, has probably evaporated entirely. And that's leading to really what is going to be a much bigger event than what would be a spring statement, which would be simply standing up and effectively reading out what the OBR is saying in terms of its latest forecasts.
What are your predictions for what we're going to hear on Wednesday then?
Well, so I think given that what we've seen is a government that's come into office, talked down the economy, killed the animal spirits in the economy, talked about this fictitious black hole that they keep going on about, but the OBR has debunked, given that they've layered taxes, huge taxes on businesses and the impact that that's having, given that they borrowed and spent like they're back in the 1970s, that's pushing up inflationary pressures. That means interest rates higher for longer, higher costs for mortgage holders, higher costs for businesses. And of course it also means that on our national debt that they've added to substantially, the costs of servicing that debt have been rocketing up as well. We're at about 100 billion a year, which is twice what we spend on defence. So to answer your question with that as a backdrop, I'm afraid I'm expecting that a lot, if not all, of her fiscal headroom will have disappeared, and she's going to have to explain to us how she's going to make that up, which might lead her into some decisions that are going to be potentially quite painful for a lot of people.
For people watching and listening to this, though, Mr. Stride, they may be scratching their heads wondering what's different between her budget and indeed the last Tory one. Who should really take the blame for the state of the economy today, considering that the Conservatives were in power for 14 years before Rachel Reeves?
So I think the nature of what has happened here is different as between when we were in office and what is happening now. And the key distinction is, of course, we had massive external challenges to our economy. We had COVID, which shrank the UK economy by over 10% overnight, the biggest contraction since 1709 and the Great Frost. We then had huge inflationary pressures from the war between Ukraine and Russia. We had to get inflation back under control, which we did. It was bang on target on the day of the last general election. What this government actually has done is simply what I described: talk down the economy, loaded up businesses with taxes, borrowed and spending an awful lot of money that's pushing up inflation and interest rates. So it's very different. What this government is doing is these are challenges and difficulties that are of their making, and they really started with that autumn budget in October of last year.
And look, I've made the point to Darren Jones in an earlier interview about the business bashing budget. Take that aside, and we can also criticise the Tories for bashing business with a 6% increase to corporation tax, but let's just leave that to the side for now. You say it's different. It's not all that different.
Well,
go on.
Okay,
corporation tax, you're going to bring it down if you get into power?
Yeah, well, we'll look at all taxes, and we will certainly be looking at lowering the tax burden and doing things for the tax system to encourage business.
But you didn't when you were in power.
But on corporation tax, it was 20. Well, we did actually, because it was 25% in 2010 when we first came into power. We actually got it down to 19% before the kind of external impacts on the economy that I've described happened. The overall tax burden, you're right, for the reasons that I've explained of COVID and so on, it has been rising. But what we've got to do is get that historically high tax burden down. What this government is doing, if you look at all the forecasts, is not only have they got the highest tax burden at the moment, but they're going to be adding to that. It's going to be growing and getting even greater over the next 5 years. So we have got to reverse that, absolutely.
OK, but back to my point. When you say, it's very different, we're predicting now government spending being 45% of GDP by the end of this Parliament. Under Boris Johnson, it was 45.4% of GDP. We've now got a situation where the civil service is at 515,000. The Tories pledged to cut the civil service by 91,000, and actually the numbers went up. So it's more of the same, really, from Labour, isn't it?
Well, on the point about the size of the state, those figures that you've mentioned there, Camilla, of course, what was happening under Boris Johnson was started under Boris, we spent about £400 billion, making sure we didn't have the kind of mass unemployment that many were predicting at that time, that COVID shut down huge swathes of the UK economy. And we also spent quite a lot of money supporting some very vulnerable people, millions of vulnerable people who would otherwise have found it very difficult under the high levels of inflation that were imported because of the war in Europe. So I think there were particular circumstances there. But you're absolutely right. We have got to start getting the tax burden down. But this government is not doing that. What it is doing is borrowing ever more money, spending vast amounts of money, and taxing the living daylights out of business. And what that ultimately means is a smaller economy, and it means that people up and down the country struggle that much harder to make ends meet, because living standards, the Joseph Rowntree Foundation today have just issued a report. Their analysis shows that actually the average family will be £1,400 worse off by the end of this Parliament than they are at the moment. And that's because you take those decisions, I'm afraid.
I know. I mean, I love this idea of a Tory minister now quoting the Joseph Rowntree Foundation. The next thing we know, we're going to have Tory ministers attacking Labour over food banks in this topsy-turvy world. Rachel Reeves will rightly argue that living standards fell under the Conservatives.
Well, there were challenges around living standards for the reasons that I've given. Very high inflation, which was not something that we created here in our economy. It was something that came through higher energy prices and increases in inflation, which happened to many countries around the world. But for the last 13 months, in the run-up to the last general election, real wages, for example, have been increasing in every single month. We had the fastest growing economy in the G7, near record level of employment, near record low level of unemployment, and as I say, we got inflation down from over 11% at the back end of 2022 to bang on target at 2% on the day of the general election. So those were huge challenges, but I think we were making a great deal of progress. It's only taken this government, Camilla, 9 months to completely unwind all of that and leave us in a very precarious situation as an economy.
So global forces made inflation go up, but the Tories take the credit for it coming down.
Well, no, it coming down was a result of both the Bank of England and monetary policy, which required higher interest rates. But what government certainly did was to accommodate that on the fiscal side. That's the spending side. So what we had to do as a government was to make sure we allowed monetary policy to work, but to have an accommodative fiscal policy. So we had to take tough decisions, for example, on public sector pay increases. OK, that's one of the ways in which we got inflation down. This government, when they got in, 14% for train drivers, 22% for junior doctors, no requirement for improvements to productivity, no strings attached, and that's why you have inflation staying higher for longer and interest rates higher for longer, which hurts people with mortgages, businesses trying to invest, and costs us more on servicing our national debt. That's the distinction here.
Is it your view that we are in a per capita GDP recession right now? Or GDP per capita recession, I should say?
Yeah, GDP per capita is declining at the moment. We have GDP, which is incredibly flat, and given changes in the size of the population, it is the case that that is happening, and it's happening on this government's watch.
So therefore, and I've asked you this before, and you were a little bit ambivalent in your answer, if we go into a full recession, shouldn't the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, resign?
So, look, going around, Camilla, I remember we had a long series of you asking this question over and over last time. Going around and asking, demanding.
It's a perfectly reasonable
yes, it is,
question.
but I'm going to give you a completely... I'm going to give you a perfectly straight answer. And the perfectly straight answer is that running around demanding the resignation of all sorts of ministers left, right and centre is not the way that we're going to do our duty by this country. The way we do our duty by this country is to hold this government to account, to expose their failings, to push them to do the right kind of things, and in the longer term, over the next months and years, to do the hard, deep thinking to make sure we come up with the solutions for our country that we can take to the electorate of the next general election in a way that allows us to prevail and come back into government and do the right things instead of the wrong things that this government's doing.
Final question on your right-wing comrades in reform, Mel Stride. The National Education Union wants to table a motion that teachers teach school children that reform is far right and racist. Do you think reform is far right and racist?
I think to apply that as a general comment to any political party that's part of the democratic process and has representatives in Parliament is wrong. I mean, if it is exactly as he presented to me, I haven't seen this story and had a chance to look at it closely, but no, I would, on the face of it, disagree with that.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, isn't it?
No,
because the failure is
you're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back,
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
and we do not shy away from the difficult stuff.
Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood.
So join me on Jubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more. Whether it's breaking royal news, please bring us up to date, or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello everyone, Patrick Christie's here with an exclusive opportunity just for you, our incredible GB News viewers. We're giving you the opportunity to win a VIP studio tour right here at GB News HQ. Plus, you'll also get to meet yours truly. It's easy to enter, just head to gbnews.com/community competition and follow the easy steps. Don't miss out, enter now, and I'll see you soon at GB News. Full T's and C's apply.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently. It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it? It's explosive. I mean, this is very good. It's lively.
850. Your government sat there short and it did nothing.
It's controversial. And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born. It's everything you need to kickstart your evening. Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it. That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The royal family is an enduring symbol of tradition, unity and pride for Britain. At GB News, we celebrate what makes this country great. In our new royal newsletter series, you can join me, Cameron Walker, for Inside the Palace, an exclusive look every week that takes you beyond the gates and brings you the very latest from those at the heart of the monarchy. Never miss a royal moment again. Sign up now. Go to gbnews.com/royal newsletter and get the latest straight to your inbox.
With me now in the studio is the former Conservative leader and Work and Pensions Secretary, Sir Ian Duncan Smith, MP for Chingford and Woodford Green. Lovely to see you this morning.
Camilla, always good to be here.
Let's talk China, because I know you're concerned that the Energy and Climate Change Secretary, Ed Miliband, is basically benefiting Beijing with this quest to have more solar panels, more wind farms and more electric vehicles. Kemi Badenoch gave a speech in the week where she abandoned that net zero by 2050 pledge, saying that it only plays into communist China's hands because they produce most of this stuff and we import it in. Tell me about this amendment that's been tabled to Miliband's GB Energy Bill.
It's very simple. It's about 3 lines, and it says that GB Energy are not allowed to invest or purchase any product made from China or anywhere, actually, by slave labour. And that says simply no slave labour in the supply chains. Now, what's interesting about this, we know that the polysilicon involved in the solar arrays is made in Xinjiang.
Yes.
That is made by slave labour. There's a genocide taking place there. So the men that have been put into these slave labour camps are producing that. We know that one of the reasons why China has gone from nowhere on net zero to suddenly the dominant player in the world is because they break the WTO rules because the banks subsidise their industries. But really worse than that is that they are rampant users of slave labour in many products that people, without realising it, buy, but in solar arrays and also in the wind turbines. Lots of that stuff is made by slave labour. They know that in the government. Every government knows this now. There's a beginning of a crackdown in Europe, but not here in the UK. They're going to dump their product at cheap prices. Why cheap? Because they don't pay their workers to do it. And Miliband now is determined to overturn that amendment.
Wow.
On Tuesday, Labour will be asked to vote for the introduction of slave labour into UK supply chains.
All right, well, we'll be watching that one closely. Of course, we've still got this Chinese super embassy going ahead in Tower Hamlets. David Lammy, the Foreign Secretary, has said, well, we're building it because it's in Beijing's interests. What's your reaction to that?
Well, just a load of old rubbish, really. I've had 2 protests out there. We've had 4,000 and 5,000 people.
Yeah.
So the key to this is that the government has called it in, because twice now Tower Hamlets has rejected it. None of the residents want it. And by the way, there are 200 British citizens who have flats on that site. So if they give that to China, they will be living on Chinese territory. I mean, absurd, right? It's right across the big communication lines that lie underground between Canary Wharf, central London and the city. And the security services we know said, we don't like this at all because they'll be able to tap into that and disrupt it. And the third element to this, which is really quite peculiar, is that the Chinese themselves want a super embassy and they'll be stuffing it with another 200 people, all spies, of course, which is what they want to do. Here we have one...
All spies?
Pretty much.
OK.
Every time they have a super embassy anywhere in the world, extraterritorial activity bumps right up. And the one last bit, which is the key, the Met Police originally said this is not the right location. Suddenly, they've reversed that and said it's OK. We've had 2 protests there, one 4, one 5,000, and the roads were shut.
So do you think we're going to win this war, though?
The Met have to be honest about this and tell the government this is the wrong place.
Can we move on to benefits? Because I was quite struck by this pie chart in the Sunday Times. Government spending in 24 to 25. Have a look at that then. So benefits bill now up to 314 billion.
Yep.
You compare that with health, which is at 202 billion. That is a staggering growth, isn't it? When you were Work and Pension Secretary, you managed to get that bill down by, I believe, 31 billion.
Yeah, roughly, yeah.
Introducing universal credit. When you listened to Liz Kendall, your successor in the House of Commons this week, what did you think? 5 billion off? I mean, it just seems like a drop in the ocean to our audience.
I'm kind of with Liz Kendall as well. She's got to try and get these numbers down. But we put a programme out at the Centre for Social Justice, which would have yielded her over 30 billion in savings over a period, but they would have got the savings down by getting people back to work. There's one thing that's happening which gives them huge opportunity here. The sickness benefit was always outside of universal credit. I couldn't get Osborne to do it. I couldn't get others. The last government started bringing it in. That means all the sickness benefit people who never got seen by anybody at all now will be seen by jobs advisors who will now start putting them under pressure to get them into work. That means they could, if they really accelerated that, get real savings by getting people into work. Sickness benefit now, majority that call for it are mental health.
Yes.
Of those, the majority are depression and anxiety, which are treatable conditions. What's the #1 treatment? Work.
On that note, Jeremy Hunt, your Conservative colleague, the former Chancellor, has written a piece next to this pie chart that I've just mentioned. The most sensible starting point would be to remove non-severe mental health conditions from the benefits assessment process. What do you think of that?
Let me just tell you, 84% of GPs, when asked about this, said they think that we are medicalising the ups and downs of normal life.
What do you think?
I think they're right on this. I think far too often marginal cases will be claiming depression and anxiety. We all feel bad about life at times. The key thing is not to lock them away on sickness benefit, which makes it worse. What you want is, as I said, work is the single best treatment for someone depressed or anxious, because it gets them back into meeting other people, learning about skills, etc.
So you do agree with Jeremy Hunt to an extent?
Well, I think think we've got to review the whole idea.
He said non-severe mental health conditions should not be part of the benefits assessment
the problem
process.
always is when you start defining something like that, who is actually going to adjudicate what that means? I think now it's back, it's in universal credit or coming into universal credit. There is no question that this sort of process can now be engaged. Get rid of the work capability assessment. Say, we're going to talk to everybody about doing work of some sort, even part-time. Try and get them in, because if they can do it, it's better for them, and they will almost certainly come off the benefit. So getting people back into work is the key element. By the way, the $5 billion I was puzzled about. Why, when we're talking of much bigger savings, is she talking $5 billion? Then the penny dropped. In a rush, by the way, because they were never planning to have this in the spring statement originally. And then, of course, I realised they needed the $5 billion in the spring statement, so the OBR wouldn't rule that she had broken her own fiscal rule, which is that she's meant to keep a certain sum of money available to herself. That's gone now under the mess she got into in the first budget. So now she's demanded quickly that the department come up with a single figure. $5 billion is very small for the department, but that now gets her off the hook with the OBR.
Understood. Let's just move on to foreign affairs. What's your assessment of Donald Trump's handling of Vladimir Putin? Because you've been quite critical of the US president in the week.
Well, I just think I see Steve Witkoff, his guy who's gone over there for the negotiations, has come out saying what a good guy Putin is.
Well, he said that Starmer is posturing and it's just prose, this idea of having a coalition of the willing. He couldn't name the 5 Ukrainian territories under Russia's control.
It's like everything else. I'm beginning to find that some of these people are just a mouthy bunch that go out and say what they think. You know, I don't know whether it's what Trump thinks, but I do know that too many people around President Trump think it's a field day for saying what you think about what is a very tough situation. I say to any of them, by the way, Witkoff as well, come with me. I'll take you to the front line in Ukraine. You go and see what this rather nice guy has been doing, destroying lives, destroying homes, bombing flats for no reason in the middle of towns, you know, pinching kids, taking them back to Russia, trying to make them into Russians. I don't know what world he's living in, by the way, but it's certainly a world cosseted away from anything. But come with me to the front line and I'll show him.
What's Trump playing at here? Because you presumably weren't particularly impressed with the outcome of that 90-minute call.
Well,
the ceasefire that wasn't really a ceasefire.
No, well, it's not a ceasefire.
Is he a bad negotiator? What's your assessment of the president?
I have to keep reminding them, the man they're dealing with is an old KGB operative. The one thing they know and are taught straight along is how you negotiate. They know how to string out a negotiation. They know how to refuse to do something and then give you a little bit at the end, which is what he's done. They called this a ceasefire. It's not a ceasefire. Putin has agreed that they won't fire at each other's energy resources, OK? But I said, why has he done that suddenly? The answer is because the Ukrainians are beginning to knock out his fuel plants and all the other bits and pieces. Now he's worried. So what he does, he wants to put a straitjacket around them, but not stop fighting. So they've taken that away and come away basically with worse than nothing, an advantage to Putin. So I don't see how Zelensky can possibly accept that. It does seem to me to be bizarre. If they want a ceasefire is very simple. Stop fighting. That's the long and the short of it, right? No conditions on it. It's a peace treaty that you start discussing negotiations.
Quick final couple of questions on the Tories. How's Kemi Badenoch doing? You backed her. Why aren't you in her shadow cabinet? Doesn't she need a bit more wisdom and experience in there?
Well, that's up to her. But my general view is that I'm busy elsewhere.
Yes, I know, but you would add some heft, would you not?
Well, that's kind of you to say so. I don't know. I'd simply know where the target lies in each of these cases. But I think she's
doing all right. 48% say they don't think she's doing.
Well, that's because, you know, I have to tell you, the leader of the opposition is the toughest job you get in politics. Getting known, getting noticed is very difficult, particularly when there's a crisis on. The government gets all the notice. I say to my party, you've just got to allow her to get the time to get on the front foot. I think she has all the essentials. She has courage, she has guts, she has intelligence, and she has aggression when she needs it. The key question is she's got to pick the right targets and build that profile.
Can't wait to get in that sea.
Lovely and warm.
Just like the feeling of having great travel insurance.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
after a wet and windy couple of weeks for Spain and Portugal. There's some dry weather on offer and plenty of sunshine across the eastern Mediterranean too. Still some showers affecting the far north of Spain and Portugal, and some heavy downpours across parts of Italy and Croatia over the next couple of days. But across the eastern parts of the Mediterranean, parts of Turkey and Cyprus, plenty of sunshine on offer. The best of the sunshine through the rest of the week, though, definitely across the Canary Islands, and highs here likely to reach around 21 or 22.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Hello, here's your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. During the week ahead, most of us will see some rain at times, but equally some sunshine too. Low pressure is pulling away to the southeast of the UK at the moment. That's taking most of today's showers away to the southeast, allowing a little ridge of high pressure to build in from the northwest, so things should quieten down for a time at least over the next 24 hours or so. Back to tonight though, we've still got some showers for a time this evening across the southeast corner of the UK. Some of those could be heavy, even thundery for a while as well. But notice they tend to fade away as we go into the early hours of Monday. A lot of low cloud left behind, so quite murky with some hill fog in places. Whereas towards the northwest of the UK, under clearer skies, we'll see a fairly widespread frost, certainly in rural spots, with temperatures here down to -3 or -4 Celsius. As for Monday itself, then, we start the day with some rain across Shetland there, but elsewhere in the north, plenty of fine weather to start Monday, lots of sunshine around, but as I say, it will be quite a cold start, some frost to clear first thing. Plenty of sunshine for Northern Ireland, but once again, a fairly widespread frost to start the day. Brighter skies across parts of northwest England and western parts of Wales with some high cloud moving in here. Whereas towards the southeast, we're under that thick band of cloud there, quite a murky start with some fog to clear. And notice that across the south, though, temperatures holding well above freezing. So as we go through the rest of the day, the low cloud in the south and southeast will gradually lift and break to allow some sunshine to come through. And then for much of the UK, Monday does look quite promising, plenty of sunshine around. But notice towards the northwest that cloud and rain across the far north there, pushing its way southeastwards across northern and western Scotland into western parts of Northern Ireland too. Temperatures generally around average, if not just above, in the low, locally mid-teens Celsius. As for Tuesday, well, it's the turn of the south of the UK to see some outbreaks of rain, whereas towards the north of the UK, brighter skies, just 1 or 2 showers, and all the while those temperatures still holding up fairly well in the range low to mid-teens. We'll see further bands of rain moving their way southeastwards across the UK during the rest of the week, weakening all the while though, and all the time those temperatures stay around or just above average.
Join me, Dannatt, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, though.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Headliners on GB News 11 p.m. every night. It's got 3 top comedians going through the next day's newspapers so you don't have to read them, which is great.
That's a good point.
He's lying. Maybe he's not lying.
That's Headliners every night from 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. as well on GB News, Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, and as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Joining me now is the former head of the British Army, Lord Dannatt. Lovely to see you this morning, Lord Dannatt. Can we just talk? I don't know if you caught my interview with Duncan Smith earlier, but he was being quite critical of Steve Witkoff. This is the envoy to President Trump for Ukraine. First of all, because he couldn't name 5 Ukrainian territories under Russia's control, but also for criticising Starmer's coalition of the willing as posture and pose. What do you make of that interview he's given to Tucker Carlson?
Steve Witkoff is one of those people who is manifestly out of his depth on the world stage, masquerading as an envoy of the American president. We all know that he's just a chum of Donald Trump's. They play golf together. He's a businessman. He's the sort of person that Trump likes. But he's out of his depth, and talking on that radio show just indicated, because he couldn't mention, he talked about 5 places, but it's 4 oblasts, and Crimea is completely separate. So we have to take sort of things that he says with a pinch of salt. But the trouble is, it's dangerous. And yes, they are listening to Putin, they're talking to Putin, they're recycling Putin's arguments. And frankly, it's just undermining day by day the position of Zelensky, the position of Ukraine, which is worrying in itself, but frankly, it's worrying for the security of Europe. And that's something we should all be extraordinarily concerned about.
What's your analysis of Donald Trump's handling of Vladimir Putin? We haven't spoken since that 90-minute phone call. Trump emerges seemingly victorious, saying it's wonderful that they've come to this deal on not attacking energy and other infrastructure. It's not a ceasefire, though, is it?
No, it's not a ceasefire at all. A 90-minute conversation out of which a few shreds have emerged. I mean, I think, again, this is Trump trying to be the businessman, trying to be the deal maker, trying to indicate that actually his friend and his business associate, Vladimir Putin, he can do business with. But it's worse than smoke and mirrors. It's downright dangerous. And as you were discussing with Ian Duncan Smith, the only element that came out of that conversation was this very marginal ceasefire point about not attacking infrastructure. And Ian Duncan Smith was actually quite right, because this is now a point of vulnerability for Vladimir Putin. The longer-range weapons that the Ukrainians are using very successfully are starting to do real damage to the Russian economy. And I think there's a wider point there that after 3 years, and actually longer than that, because sanctions started long before that, there is an accumulative effect which is being felt by the Russians. Not the least of which, of course, also is the effect of what's happening to them on the battlefield. Yes, people say in one breath, actually, the Russians are doing quite well, but my goodness, their casualty rate is huge. Reasonable estimates now are that they've lost 250,000 dead, about 1 million injured as well. Those are huge figures. So we mustn't be suckered by what we're hearing from Trump's envoys, effectively spouting Putin's language. But bear in mind that Putin is taking some pressure as well.
Lord Dannatt, you just described Vladimir Putin as one of Donald Trump's friends. I mean, is that how you view their relationship, one of friendship between the US president and the Russian president?
Well, friendship is probably going too strongly, but Trump would like to see Putin as someone he can do business with, a colleague in the business world, if you like, and perhaps that's a little bit stopping short of calling him a friend. But he believes he can deal with him man-to-man, conversation, open conversation, and that they can meet mutually beneficial objectives. And the trouble is, those mutually beneficial objectives are at the cost of Ukraine's sovereignty, Ukraine's independence, and by extension are very damaging to security and peace in Europe. And that is the thing that we should be really concerned about, and concerned that Trump is taking the United States progressively away from Europe, thereby weakening NATO, and thereby again playing into Putin's agenda. Bear in mind, as Ian Duncan Smith was saying, scrape Putin to the core, you get an unreformed KGB colonel whose beloved Soviet Union and Warsaw Pact was defeated in the late 1980s by the solidarity of NATO and the solidarity of the West, underpinned by America, and of course led by Margaret Thatcher and Ronald Reagan at the time. That's what Putin would most love to damage and to shatter and to break now that cohesion in the West. And that's really damaging for us Europeans.
Talking of European security, can we just have a chat about Heathrow? I think at the moment the government's still investigating, along with the security services, as to whether there was anything suspicious about the fire, whether it may have been sabotage. I'm getting the increasing impression that they think not. However, are you concerned about the vulnerability of some of our critical infrastructure?
Well, I think the answer after the Heathrow episode of a few days ago, one has to say yes. It is quite incredible that one substation could be taken down or come down. We'll have to wait for the negotiation to see whether there was a malign hand in there, but have the effect of closing Heathrow Airport with the huge disruption. Now, if I was a KGB operative, I would be looking around at other weak points in this country to decide where I might launch an attack, because that episode that happened at Heathrow, if it was a malign operation, was a very clever one. It was a very well targeted one and had a demonstrative effect. Now, whether it was an accident or whether it was sabotage, we don't know. The authorities are suggesting it was an accident, but it does underline the need for greater resilience in so many aspects of our national infrastructure, and attacking the power grid and attacking our cyber security, or preserving our cyber security. These are other areas that we need to invest very heavily in and be very cautious about.
Yes, I mean, there may be a call now, considering the climate that we're living in, with everything going on the world stage, of perhaps having more of a military presence at some of these key infrastructure, critical infrastructure building sites. Do you think that would be a good idea? May not have enough troops to cover the ground.
Well, Camilla, you rather answered your own question there.
Yeah.
We certainly haven't got the troops to do that. But go back to the days of the Cold War. We had key installations and troops were earmarked to protect them. So the principle is probably right. But I think that I think that that's probably not the answer at the present moment. It's actually not practical at the present moment with the number of troops that we haven't got. But I think a very careful survey needs to be done of where the critical nodes are in our national infrastructure and make sure that they are well protected, and to make sure also that there is redundancy, that if this thing goes out, then something else can cut in. And whether it's power stations, whether it's, well, all the critical aspects of our national infrastructure need to be looked at very carefully, and redundancy thought through extremely carefully.
Heavy showers first thing will be followed by a warm, cosy day. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, here's your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. During the week ahead, most of us will see some rain at times, but equally some sunshine too. Low pressure is pulling away to the southeast of the UK at the moment. That's taking most of today's showers away to the southeast, allowing a little ridge of high pressure to build in from the northwest, so things should quieten down for a time at least over the next 24 hours or so. Back to tonight though, we've still got some showers for a time this evening across the southeast corner of the UK. Some of those could be heavy, even thundery for a while as well. But notice they tend to fade away as we go into the early hours of Monday. A lot of low cloud left behind, so quite murky with some hill fog in places. Whereas towards the northwest of the UK, under clearer skies, we'll see a fairly widespread frost, certainly in rural spots, with temperatures here down to -3 or -4 Celsius. As for Monday itself, then, we start the day with some rain across Shetland there, but elsewhere in the north, plenty of fine weather to start Monday, lots of sunshine around, but as I say, it will be quite a cold start, some frost to clear first thing. Plenty of sunshine for Northern Ireland, but once again, a fairly widespread frost to start the day. Brighter skies across parts of northwest England and western parts of Wales with some high cloud moving in here. Whereas towards the southeast, we're under that thick band of cloud there, quite a murky start with some fog to clear. And notice that across the south, though, temperatures holding well above freezing. So as we go through the rest of the day, the low cloud in the south and southeast will gradually lift and break to allow some sunshine to come through. And then for much of the UK, Monday does look quite promising, plenty of sunshine around. But notice towards the northwest that cloud and rain across the far north there, pushing its way southeastwards across northern and western Scotland into western parts of Northern Ireland too. Temperatures generally around average, if not just above, in the low, locally mid-teens Celsius. As for Tuesday, well, it's the turn of the south of the UK to see some outbreaks of rain, whereas towards the north of the UK, brighter skies, just 1 or 2 showers, and all the while those temperatures still holding up fairly well in the range low to mid-teens. We'll see further bands of rain moving their way southeastwards across the UK during the rest of the week, weakening all the while though, and all the time those temperatures stay around or just above average.
There will be a light breeze in the morning, leading to a warm front. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
There's just 2 weeks left to see how you could be a spring winner, as we have an incredible £17,777 in tax-free cash to be won. And if that wasn't enough, we'll also give you the latest Mulberry handbag and not 1, but 2 sought-after designer watches. Make sure you don't miss out, as lines close on the 4th of April. For another chance to win the lot, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus 1 standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. Call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge, or post your name and number to GB12 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 4th of April. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, isn't it?
No,
because the failure is
you're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back,
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
and we do not shy away from the difficult stuff.
Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood.
So join me on Jubes and Co weeknights at 6 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
The royal family is an enduring symbol of tradition, unity, and pride for Britain. At GB News, we celebrate what makes this country great. In our new royal newsletter series, you can join me, Cameron Walker, for Inside the Palace, an exclusive look every week that takes you beyond the gates and brings you the very latest from those at the heart of the monarchy. Never miss a royal moment again. Sign up now. Go to gbnews.com/royal newsletter and get the latest straight to your inbox.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more. Whether it's breaking royal news, please bring us up to date, or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Welcome, this is Free Speech Nation with me, Josh Howie. On the show tonight, a school cancels Easter. Andrew Doyle is back to talk about Oxford setting to make their 800-year-old Latin ceremony non-binary. And we are joined by an NHS nurse with perhaps the most messed up story of institutional capture that we've ever had on this show. But first, the news with Sophia Wensler.
Good evening. Your headlines at 7 o'clock. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney has called a snap election for the 28th of April. Mr Carney has only been the Prime Minister for a matter of days after the former Bank of England governor took over from Justin Trudeau. Mr Carney addressed ongoing tensions with the US after Donald Trump's trade war and plans to make Canada the 51st state.
We are facing the most significant crisis of our lifetimes because of President Trump's unjustified trade actions and his threats to our sovereignty. Our response must be to build a strong economy and a more secure Canada. President Trump claims that Canada isn't a real country. He wants to break us so America can own us. We will not let that happen.
Meanwhile, Sir Ed Davies accused Labour of allowing Donald Trump to bully Britain on trade.